The title of this book is probably the most misread sentence in modern business literature. Good to great. Most readers hear that as a growth story, a path from adequate to excellent. Collins meant it as a warning. Good, he argues, is the enemy of great. The reason most organizations never become great isn't failure. It's comfortable mediocrity. And the machine that keeps them there runs on the same logic that made them successful in the first place. I'm Jake, and this is the Operator's Library, where we go deep on the books that change how operators actually think and build. Today, Good to Great by Jim Collins, first published in 2001. Over 5 million copies sold. One of the most cited management books of the last 25 years. And one of the most misapplied. Here's what we're covering. I'm going to show you why Collins' research question is actually more interesting than most people's answers to it. Then we go deep on 3 ideas most operators either skip or get exactly backward. And we'll close with the part of this book Collins was most uncomfortable with. And the 2 things you do differently because of it. Let's get into it. First, the setup. Because the methodology is the story inside the story. Collins and his team started with 1,435 companies. They ran the financials and narrowed to 11 that made a specific transition. At least 15 years of average or below average returns. Then a sustained shift to cumulative returns 3 times the market or better. Maintained for at least 15 years after the shift. Not a good year, not a great decade. A structural, durable change in performance. Then they matched each great company to a direct comparison company. Same industry, same window, similar resources, different outcome. And they asked, what explains the gap? That research design is the most important thing in the book. Collins wasn't studying successful companies and reverse engineering their habits. He was studying matched pairs and looking for divergence. Why did Kimberly-Clark become great while Scott Paper didn't? Why did Walgreens compound at over 15 times the market while Eckerd barely broke even? Same industry, same era, different results. The findings are what the rest of the book is about. The first idea I want to go deep on isn't the Hedgehog Concept, even though that's what gets cited most. It's what Collins calls first who, then what. And most operators have this exactly backward. The conventional approach to building a great organization. Decide where you're going, set the strategy, then find the people to execute it. Vision first, people second. Collins found the opposite pattern in every one of his 11 great companies. The leaders who made the transition didn't start with a destination. They started with the right people on the bus. And once they had the right people, then they figured out where to drive. This sounds like management speak until you sit with what it actually implies. It means the strategy came after the team, not before it. The direction was partly an output of who was in the room, not purely a top-down input. And the hiring decision is more important than the planning decision. Not equally important, more important. Collins is specific about what the right people means, not the smartest, not the most experienced. People who don't need to be managed, who find mediocrity intolerable on their own terms. His test is blunt. If this company hit a severe setback tomorrow, would this person redouble their effort or start looking for the exit? Here's where operators tend to go wrong. They apply this principle to hiring while ignoring its corollary, which Collins is equally explicit about. If you have the wrong people on the bus, no amount of strategy, culture, or motivation will fix it. And getting the right people on means getting the wrong people off. Not managing around them. Not finding a better fit role. Off. Collins found that good to great leaders spent more time on people decisions than on any other single category of decisions. Not because they were soft. Because they understood that the team is the strategy. Carnegie's insight, that the most effective operators understand people before they try to move them, applies here at the organizational level. Collins is saying that insight has to precede strategy, not follow it. The second principle is the one that gets the most attention and the most misapplication. The Hedgehog Concept. Collins borrows it from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one big thing. Great companies are hedgehogs. They find the one thing they can be genuinely great at, and they orient everything around it. The concept lives at the intersection of 3 questions. What can you be the best in the world at? Not the best in your market, the best in the world. What drives your economic engine? Meaning, what single metric, if improved, most improves your long-term profitability? And what are you deeply passionate about? Most readers turn this into a Venn diagram exercise. They sit down, answer the 3 questions, find the overlap, and call that their strategy. That's not what Collins found. The good to great companies didn't discover their hedgehog concept in a planning retreat. They discovered it over years, through relentless self-examination and a willingness to abandon things they were good at that didn't fit. Walgreens is the clearest example. After years of asking what they could be best in the world at, they landed on this: convenient drugstores. Not the best drugstores, not the most innovative pharmacies, the most convenient. Every decision flowed from that. They measured profit per customer visit, not per store or per prescription. They put locations on corners, not mid-block, because corners have more foot traffic. When competitors were adding restaurants and postal outlets to their stores, Walgreens was doubling down. That clarity is harder than it looks, because it requires saying no to things that are working. Colin's point is that the enemy of the hedgehog concept isn't a bad strategy. It's a good strategy that isn't the right strategy. Here's the pressure test for operators. How many things does your organization do at a genuinely best-in-the-world level? Not best in category. Not better than last year. Best in the world. If the honest answer is none yet, the hedgehog concept is a diagnostic, not a direction. It tells you haven't found your thing. It doesn't tell you what your thing is. Finding it requires running experiments, collecting evidence, and being willing to stop doing good things in service of the one great thing. Most operators aren't willing to do that. Good is comfortable. Great requires giving something up. The third idea is the one most readers skip. Collins calls it the Stockdale Paradox, and I think it's the most practically important concept in the book. James Stockdale was a U.S. Navy admiral captured in Vietnam, held as a prisoner of war for 7.5 years, tortured repeatedly, with no certainty of release. Collins interviewed him and asked who didn't make it out. Stockdale answered immediately: the optimists. The ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas." Christmas would come and go. "We'll be out by Easter." Easter would come and go. And eventually, they died of a broken heart. Collins extracted from this a specific paradox. The leaders of every good-to-great company he studied held two things simultaneously that seem incompatible: absolute, unwavering faith that they would ultimately prevail, and complete, unfiltered honesty about how difficult the current situation actually was. This is different from optimism. Optimism filters reality toward the positive outcome. The Stockdale Paradox doesn't filter. It holds both. We will get through this, and the situation right now is genuinely hard, without letting either one collapse the other. Collins found that comparison company leaders did one of two things. They were falsely optimistic, papering over problems with positive projections, or they became fatalistic when reality didn't match expectations. The great companies did neither. They built what Collins calls a culture of discipline, where bad news traveled fast, where people told the truth about what was happening, and where no one confused hope for a plan. For operators, this is primarily an information environment problem. Are the people around you telling you what's true, or what they think you want to hear? Do your metrics reflect reality, or reality after it's been adjusted upward? Most organizations develop antibodies against bad news over time, not because leaders are weak, but because bad news makes people uncomfortable, and over time people stop surfacing it. Then reality arrives all at once, in a form no one was prepared for. The Stockdale Paradox is a culture problem before it's ever a leadership problem. Now here's where I'll push back on the book, because it deserves it. Collins' methodology has a problem he didn't fully reckon with: survivorship bias applied forward. His 11 great companies were selected based on performance up to 2001. History didn't stop in 2001. Circuit City was one of the 11. It filed for bankruptcy in 2008, 7 years after the book came out. Fannie Mae, another of the 11, required a government bailout in 2008 that cost over $100 billion. Not every company on that list aged equally well. This doesn't make the findings wrong. It makes them incomplete. Collins identified what those companies had in common in a specific window. He couldn't predict which of those patterns were durable and which were fragile to environmental shifts. The hedgehog concept works until the world changes in a way that makes your one thing irrelevant. First who, then what works until the labor market you were operating in no longer exists. Nassim Taleb made a version of this critique directly. He argued that good to great is what happens when you find patterns in noisy data and mistake them for causal laws. That's harsh, and not entirely fair. But it's not entirely wrong either. The honest reading is this: Collins found real patterns in a specific set of companies in a specific era. Those patterns are useful diagnostics. They probably increase the probability of good outcomes. They are not a formula, and they are not permanent. The book is a map drawn from observation, not a blueprint derived from first principles. Use it as a lens, not a prescription. Here's what I want you to do this week. 2 things. First, apply the first who, then what test to one person already on your team, not a hypothetical future hire, someone who's there right now. Ask yourself honestly, if we hit a severe setback tomorrow, would this person redouble or start looking for the exit? You don't have to act on the answer today, but you should know the answer. Second, write down your current response to the first hedgehog question. What can we be the best in the world at? 1 sentence. Then look at every major initiative you're running this quarter and ask whether each one serves that answer or distracts from it. Count the distractions. That count is more useful than most strategy documents. The real takeaway from Good to Great isn't the framework. It's the question Collins was actually asking. Why do some organizations make a genuine, sustained leap in performance? And what do the rest have in common that keeps them stuck? The framework is just the vocabulary he built to answer it. Learn the vocabulary. But keep the question. If this breakdown was useful, subscribe. I put out a new deep dive every week on the books that change how operators think and build. And I want to know, do you think the Hedgehog Concept is genuinely useful for an operator today, or does it feel too clean for the real world? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. Next week we're going into Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, and after sitting with Collins' argument about being the best in the world at one thing, Thiel's version of that same idea is going to read very differently. See you then.